I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati.
All right. Happy Friday, guys. Welcome to Sabby Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. My special guest tonight is Kim Iversen. She is the host of the Kim Iversen Show. Welcome back, Kim. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. Great to see you.
Great to see you too. So you have been very busy.
In a good way or a bad way? I don't.
In a good way. I think you've been nailing it. I think on Rumble. I usually tune into your show, Glenn Greenwald's show, and Russell Brand. Like, you are pretty much my go-tos.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So one of the things I noticed in reference to this situation with Jeffrey Epstein and JPMorgan, I noticed that a lot of people are not talking about this story. In fact, Jimmy Dore talked about it. I saw that Whitney Webb was on his show and she came on to discuss it. You talked about it. I talked about it. In fact, I had a video clip from that went viral. It's crazy. Over 100K views. I've never had that happen with the video before. Wow. But when I searched on YouTube, I realized, it's probably because not that many people are talking about this. So I'm curious to get your take from this. Why do you feel not as many commentators are discussing the new developments in reference to Jeffrey Epstein and his connection to JPMorgan?
Well, I think that a lot of people don't really fully understand it. And, Whitney is an incredible journalist, but her stuff is really detailed. And it's like you have to kind of make almost like a chart on the wall and then try to like detail it out, all of the connections that she's making. And I think I think for a lot of people, it's pretty overwhelming. They're trying to connect all these dots, but there's just too many moving pieces and too many dots. And so I think that might have something to do with it. Because really her piece talked about how the same players who were behind Jeffrey Epstein, the same power players, were the same players that were behind JPMorgan Chase's CEO, Jamie Dimon. So it wasn't necessarily that these two men were connected. It's that the same players were behind them. And then Epstein was able to move his banking into JPMorgan Chase. And clearly all of these powerful players who were behind the scenes, really turned a blind eye and just kind of allowed the banking to continue without questioning it, without saying, hey, maybe this is being used for nefarious purposes. But to be quite honest with you, with the current case that's actually going on, where JPMorgan Chase and Jamie Dimon are named in this U.S. Virgin Islands case, where they're saying, you guys knew you had this bank account from Epstein, and it was used for nefarious purposes. You knew this, and yet you still went ahead and you didn't do anything about this bank account. I'm not 100% certain how they're going to make this case, to be honest with you, because I don't know if they can show. They're going to have to show that because I don't know how much the young women were paid, the young girls were paid. I'm not sure how they were paid, who actually paid them, through which accounts, or all of that, and how much money of that actually came out. When you're talking about accounts like Jeffrey Epstein's, which were worth millions upon millions upon millions of dollars, a few $100 or even a few $1,000 here or there is like lunch for an account like that. So I think it's going to, so I'm not 100% certain, because it's not like large sums of money were going out for potentially nefarious purposes, for criminal activity, I should say. The big power players weren't getting paid millions of dollars to do something nefarious. The illegality would be with the younger women, the younger girls who were paid, right? It's just going to be a really tough case, I think, to make. And especially if, I think the girls were paid in cash. It's going to be really tough. But nonetheless, which is unfortunate because we would love nothing more. The good thing about the case is that it might end up, and I think the real value in it is that we might end up getting some names, because names might need to be named in the case. So that's what maybe the case could bring. But I'm not 100, but who knows how far it will actually go. So I think people just aren't really paying attention to it, because I think it's just one more powerful person that's connected to Epstein, and JPMorgan Chase's Jamie Dimon just doesn't seem like, for one, his connections are not the same as all of these other players, right? The other ones, like, were on the island, got massages, they're in the black book. This is a different type of connection that doesn't seem as salacious. And so maybe that's why. Maybe, and people just don't care about JPMorgan Chase's Jamie Dimon. They should. They really should, but they don't.
Good points. A former candidate in the Virgin Islands contacted me after this story broke and said he actually tried to tell people years ago not to take money from Jeffrey Epstein. So apparently this was a recurring thing. And he was referencing Delegate Stacey Plaskett. Now, this is the same woman who wants to send Matt Taibbi to prison, right?
Right.
She took money from Jeffrey Epstein, and he said going way back, he tried to tell the candidates not to take money from him, but they wouldn't listen. But they won and he didn't. So this gentleman who told me this did not win, but people like Stacey Plaskett apparently did. She's in a weird position too, because apparently she's a delegate, she's in Congress, but she doesn't get to vote.
Right. She's a non-voting member. There's a few of them, yeah, but she's one of them. She's one of them, because the U.S. Virgin Islands is just like a territory of the United States, right? It's a colony, really. And so they don't have voting rights. It's a real sham, actually. All the territories should get voting rights, but they don't want to get, they have all this chatter in Congress about, we should make DC a state. That doesn't make there's actually a reason why DC is the way that it is. They tried putting the US Capitol in a state, but then the governor was able to because the governor's in control of the National Guard, was able to actually surround the Capitol building and use force to intimidate members of Congress. So they said, well, maybe we shouldn't have this in a state where a state governor can actually coerce us like this and have power over our daily lives and our movement. So that's why they made DC the way they made DC, for a good reason. But why, I don't understand why members of Congress keep screaming about DC, when in reality they should be screaming about places like U.S. Virgin Islands. Those are territory, Guam. These are territories where people are living there. These are their homes. They should be made states. They should be given voting power. And if they're not going to make them states, they should basically make them states. They should give them everything that a state would have, like how some states try to say, well, you couldn't have gay marriage, but you could have a union, but it's all the same. They just use a different name, whatever. But they need to be given all the rights of a state, all the voting rights of a state. There are people there. They deserve that. And they're totally unrepresented. And that it's colonization. And that is exactly what members of Congress should be screaming about. But of course they're not. They're saying they want DC. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know why they ignore these territories. But yeah, she doesn't have a vote.
Yeah, that's interesting. I know that you interviewed Alan Dershowitz, and I saw one of your clips go viral on Twitter, and I was like, oh dear, that he did not like that question. But it's weird to me. I'm like, you're Jeffrey Epstein's lawyer.
Yeah.
You don't think that question is going to come up? And then he tried to say he didn't know that you were going to ask that. But of course, you had receipts, and you said, this is exactly what I told your team when I contacted them for the interview.
And I didn't contact them for the interview. They contacted me multiple times to have him on my show. We did not ask for him. He was asking to be on my show. I hedged it the first couple of times they asked. I was kind of like, I don't know. We'll see. I had to think about it. I was like, if I have him on, I have to ask about Epstein. So I need to think about this and really prepare for this one. This isn't one I can just kind of have on and ask basic questions. This is somebody I'm going to need to really ask some questions of. So I need to think about it and wait. I wasn't saying no to it. I knew I was probably going to have him on when they approached me. I just wanted time to think about it and think about how exactly I was going to approach it. So finally I did, and we had him on, and I thought that we had made it clear, which we did, that I was going to be asking about Epstein. And he said he was taken off guard. There's no such thing as an ambush interview. He should think, as Alan Dershowitz, who's represented not only Epstein, but he's represented Trump. He's represented Mike Tyson. I mean, a lot of different people that, he should expect to be asked about any of them. He should be expected to be asked about anything in his career. I mean, and not only that, but he's known as like a bulldog attorney. He should just expect this stuff. This is what he does when he represents these clients. He asks the hard questions. He puts people on the stand and he grills them. I don't know why he wasn't prepared, but he was very taken off guard. And he's been asked these questions before. So that's the other thing. It's not like I mean, maybe some of my questions were a little different, but he's definitely been asked about Epstein. But he acted like he'd just never been asked this question, about Epstein before, and he couldn't believe it that anybody would ask him about this. So I don't know.
He tripped up a couple of times there too, because one of the things you did ask about was the massages. And first he said that he didn't get a massage. Then he said he did get a massage, but not a sexual massage. And I'm like, which one is it? And then he went on to say that, well, the massage wasn't done by a younger woman. It was an older woman. You never said it was.
Right. I just said you got a massage. Yeah. He said, it was interesting for 3 different questions. He did that 3 times where he said one answer and then changed his answer. And it's always that first answer that's the true answer, right? So he says, yeah, or he says no. And then he says, yes, I did. Well, maybe the first answer isn't the true answer. It's, with the other 2, because the other 2 questions were, was Epstein working for Mossad or something? And he said, no. They wouldn't hire him. I have been working for the state of Israel since before you were born. I'm like, oh, so you work for Mossad. Okay, got it. and they would never hire Epstein. You would know this because you're in with them. That makes a bit more sense. That does make some sense too. And then the last one being, did Epstein kill himself? And of course not. And then he backpedaled on that one and said, well, no, wait, he did, but yeah.
Yeah, for people who are not aware, I know at least for me, when I contact people for interviews, I tell them exactly, what I want to talk about. So if they're surprised in any way, shape, or form, I would not know why. But I don't do that either. I don't do like that whole ambush style interview where, let me see if I can get a gotcha. Like I tell people exactly what to expect. So they should know. I got the same criticism when I interviewed Ro Khanna, and I said I would never do this again. I would never interview him again. I did it one time, and I made it very clear to his team exactly what I wanted to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point during the interview, and the viewers actually caught this, he was rolling his eyes because I brought up force the vote, and I brought up Medicare for all, and he did not like that question.
Why
made it
wouldn't
very
he?
clear.
Look at if you're Ro Khanna, you should be expecting those questions because look at what some Republicans have been able to do. I mean, they're doing it. They were doing force the vote. They've been actually doing the very things that many people on the left were asking the people in the Progressive Caucus to do, and they didn't do it. And they caved and they said, "Now is not the time." We always get, "Now is not the time," and yet the right does it. They don't care, and there is so much to admire about the Republican Party. Whether you agree with their stances or not, their positions on things, the thing that I like about the Republican Party is that their elections seem much more fair and democratic for who ends up in the primary. Now we'll see how this cycle goes. I do think that they're maybe going to be doing a bit more suppression this time around because they really don't want Donald Trump. But in previous years, it's been more like, okay, let the best Republican win. Usually it's this, we all know who it ends up being anyway. But then the other thing is that they really, truly, I mean, even going back Tea Party and, you can go back further, but the Republican Party just really holds their people. They fight and they fight it out, and that's like the way it's supposed to be. That's democracy. They should be fighting it out. Democrats say, you better fall in line or else. And they threaten them and they say, you either do this or you're going to lose your seat. We're going to make sure of it. You're never coming back. On the Republican side, they just duke it out like Old West style. I expect any time, they're going to whip out their guns. Like, all right, let's do a draw.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. So for people who may be newer viewers for your show, they may not realize you were a part of the Bernie movement too. During that time when Bernie was running, let's go to 2020, when he was running for president in 2020, did you ever think that Bernie would turn around and do what he's doing now, supporting Joe Biden?
No, I never thought that. I never thought I would see that. Same with Tulsi Gabbard. I did not think she would actually, in the end, say, I support, Joe Biden for president, for candidate or whatever. And then Tulsi at least didn't. I mean, she's done something totally different, but she didn't go and cave to the rest of the Democratic establishment. Bernie not only endorsed Joe Biden in the end, but then now he's like just part of the Democratic establishment. I don't even know how he calls himself an independent anymore. He's a Democrat, full on establishment.
Yeah. What about the squad? Did you ever think that they would turn?
No, I didn't need, no. In fact, AOC, when she first got into office, what did she do? She staged a protest outside of Nancy Pelosi's office along with the Sunrise Movement. And we all just thought, okay, here it is. This is what we asked for. We want somebody to stand out there and really hold her feet to the fire. But then soon enough, she flipped and it was just in no time. And it was like, well, Mama Bear Nancy, Mama Bear Nancy. And now the progressives, again, you cannot distinguish them from the rest of the establishment camp, not by much. Once in a while, they'll do something that seems a little bit outside of the establishment, but if they get reprimanded too much, they reel it back in. So they're useless. The Democratic side of the party is just completely useless, including Bernie Sanders, who's basically a Democrat at this point. They've all fallen in line. They've been brainwashed with the idea that, it's an existential crisis. And this is where it gets really insane because they now, 2016 and 2020, it's an existential crisis if Trump is president of the United States. We saw that in 2016. Existential, we cannot let it happen. Then in 2020, it was existential, we cannot let it happen. And now here we are in an actual existential crisis under Joe Biden, right? And we now know what Donald Trump brings to the table. I'm not afraid of that guy anymore. Let him in. Let him in. He'd be way better than Joe Biden at this point. If it comes down to the two of them, I am voting for Donald Trump. And I've said this over and over, and I'm not alone in that. I would prefer totally different candidates than either of those two. But if it came down to those two, then that would be my vote at this point, because I do find Joe Biden to be an absolute he's an existential threat to humanity at this point, because I don't think he's running the show. I don't think I don't know who the president is. I think, if I had to guess, I think it's Antony Blinken and Jake Sullivan. I think they're the ones who are actually calling the shots.
We were just talking about this on Fault Line this morning, and I said the same thing. I don't think Joe Biden is actually making decisions because he doesn't seem to know where he is. There's been a couple of public appearances recently where there was the one where he didn't realize the prime minister was the prime minister. This is really bad. And I'm wondering, who is running things behind the scenes? And it wouldn't be the first time we had a president of the United States that had an issue where it was actually someone else, FDR. It was actually his wife who was kind of driving things in the background. So
Reagan
too. That's right.
Yeah.
So
there's been a few that have started getting dementia in their older age, and their wives or somebody else was running the show. But it's not Jill Biden running the show. This is This has got WestExec advisors all over it, and that is the advisory group that was created. It was during the Obama administration. A lot of his deputy, the deputy, undersecretary of defense, the undersecretary of state, the undersecretary, it was like the undersecretary of all of these different branches or different cabinet positions, got together and created WestExec advisors. And their whole aim was to basically transition the military industrial complex to big tech. And they successfully did this. They got tons of Pentagon money for companies like Google, Amazon's Jeff Bezos, tons of Pentagon money went to these different groups. And so they have been, when you listen to the two who are in charge of WestExec advisors, that is Michelle Flournoy and Antony Blinken. And they co-founded this group, this think tank, because they're not lobbyists, they don't actually have to register, and they don't have to disclose their client list. They don't have to say anything. They're just advising. So they don't actually, supposedly, they don't make the connections, or no, they do. They'll make the connections, but they're not the ones actually doing the meeting for you. They just tell you what to say when you go to the meeting. That's different. So they don't actually have to register it. So it's a workaround. So they created this, and they got all these contracts for these big tech companies. And when you listen to their talks that Michelle Flournoy in particular gave, she talks often about, well, we want to move warfare to this over the horizon style warfare. And I was surprised she didn't end up getting named Department of Defense head of Defense. She was definitely the one slated. She was going to be the one if Hillary Clinton got in charge, then Michelle Flournoy would have been that person. But then when I saw Antony Blinken got Secretary of State, it made sense. And then they put in Avril Haines, they put in Jake Sullivan. They all came out of WestExec advisors. So then it was like, okay, his cabinet is just filled with these people. And then when Joe Biden withdrew from Afghanistan, and I was very critical of this, I was sitting on the Hills Rising at the time. And of course I had people, Ryan Grimm, definitely more on the left, saying that, anybody who was criticizing Joe Biden's, and he was talking for a whole group of people in that same mindset, saying anybody who was criticizing Joe Biden's withdrawal from Afghanistan was actually a warmonger themselves. They're actually advocating for more war. But I knew, for one, that the withdrawal was just disastrous. You don't do a withdrawal like that. It's disastrous for the people that you've made promises to, and then you leave them behind. But secondly, I knew that the war wasn't over. They were going to move over the horizon style of warfare. That's something Antony Blinken and Michelle Flournoy had been talking about for a long time. And sure enough, what do we know now? The war in Afghanistan is not actually over. There aren't the boots there so they can get away with it, but they drone the place, they sanction the place, they hold on their money. So they've moved to this new form of no troops, no boots warfare. And that's the new strategy. And they use big tech. They've militarized big tech, as we've seen. So it's a disaster. Joe Biden's presidency is a disaster because he has these horrible war hawks sitting in that cabinet. And I would hope that anybody else who gets in there would get rid of them. But, what we see with certain cabinet, with certain administrations, they get in and it's like Goldman Sachs is always in charge of the, always in charge of the Treasury. So hopefully that wouldn't happen again. And somebody would actually come in and clean house. But I don't know, it'll take a real special anti-war person, an anti-censorship person.
It really would. So it's interesting. So you would actually vote for Trump. And I asked that because I was trying to explain this on Rising one time as well. I said that, listen, some people who supported Bernie Sanders are telling me that if Joe Biden runs again, if it's Biden and Trump, they're going to vote for Trump this time around.
Yeah, I never voted for Trump before. I've never voted for Donald Trump. I will vote for Donald Trump this time around. 100%.
This is what I've been trying to warn people because
I'm not alone. Lots of us.
Yeah, this is what I've been trying to warn people. They're like, there's no way that Joe Biden is not winning again. I'm like, nah, I don't believe the polls, Kim. I don't believe that 70% of people want to vote for Joe Biden again. I think that number is a lot lower. I think they're inflating that number to make him look decent.
Yeah, 70% of people don't even want him to run. So, so how could they suddenly say, okay, I'll vote for Joe Biden. But they don't have, they only have two other options that they don't even know about, most of them, because they're not getting any press that Marianne Williamson and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. are even on the ticket. But they are climbing. Right. They are climbing in the polls.
I had to tell my parents that they were running. My parents did not know. Sometimes I forget not everyone is in the space, so they're not paying attention the way that we are.
Yeah.
And I told my parents, and my parents were like, what? Like, my mom said, she was like, Marianne Williamson. She was like, she's going to run again. And then when I told her about RFK Jr., my mom was like, he's alive? And I was like, yes, yes, he's alive. But it kind of woke me up. It woke me up to make me realize not everybody's paying attention to this the way that we are.
Yeah, they really are. Well, in the mainstream media, they're only getting what the mainstream feeds. And if the mainstream is in lockstep and in unison, which they are, then that's all they get. All they get is Joe Biden's running again. And the entire focus of the mainstream media is going to be on the GOP and the GOP primary. They're not going to, they can get away with not focusing on the Democratic primary because it's a foregone conclusion that the sitting president, which in all honesty, it usually is anyway. So I'm not 100% blaming the establishment media on this exactly, because pretty much any sitting president, it's a foregone conclusion that they're the nominee. I don't know of a situation when they're not.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know if I know of a time when that didn't happen. Maybe it's happened. Maybe like back in the day, I don't know. But so I don't totally blame the mainstream media and just thinking, yeah, Joe Biden's the guy. And so I don't blame the voters for thinking Joe Biden's the guy. And then it's just who's Joe Biden up against. So, I think the only time the Democratic voter would think Joe Biden's not going to be running is if Joe Biden or if there's other options beside Joe Biden is if he's not running. But he says he's running.
Yeah.
The big question, though, on the Democratic side, and what I think they'll focus on is, will Kamala Harris be the pick for VP?
So I have to say this. I'm sorry, but people watching, pay attention to this. If you don't listen to anything that I say, if Joe Biden wins again, it is very unlikely, in my opinion, he's going to make it through
Right.
the entire 4 years
Yeah.
of the second term. And
Yeah.
that means that if Kamala is still VP, that's your president.
Yeah, and let me tell you, they'll only replace her with one other, maybe Gavin Newsom, but I haven't looked into him enough to know his background and who's funding him. I mean, but of course, anybody could start funding. But as far as the candidates that run, or like the current pool of who potentially would be in there, it would either be Kamala Harris or Pete Buttigieg, and that's it. And I've been saying that since the 2020 election. I came out early on and said Pete Buttigieg is the one to watch. And people were like, Pete Buttigieg, what do you mean? Well, I was following the money. And what I meant by that is, again, everything comes down to, when it comes to the Democratic side of the aisle, WestExec advisors. I'm telling you, they're the most powerful group behind all these politicians. I don't know why. Maybe because they control a lot of people who have bombs, and I don't know. But they started moving their money to Pete Buttigieg. They moved it. So they were all in on Kamala Harris. All in on Kamala. Hillary Clinton gave her entire Rolodex to Kamala Harris for the 2020 election, and they were all thinking Kamala would be the person. When Kamala clearly was not, and Tulsi Gabbard took her out in that debate, which was amazing. All of that money suddenly shifted to Pete Buttigieg, and I thought that was interesting that they would choose him out of everybody, but they did, and so all the money went there. So I was saying, okay, Pete's now the one to watch because that's who they've now bankrolled. And then they ultimately ended up with Biden in the end. And that was also a really interesting shift. But, Biden's so establishment, he's been around for so long that the establishment's not afraid of Joe. Joe is the establishment. So he was natural and easy too. But yeah, Pete Buttigieg, if it's not Kamala, it would be him. But he's also, nobody likes him either. I mean, especially with all the transportation debacles we've had with all the airlines and the trains, and who wants to go with Buttigieg?
No, and I think this is why I always tell people to follow the money, because it's true. You got to pay attention to who is bankrolled. So, like, for example, this situation with Tucker Carlson. So it was revealed, I saw you tweeted this out, that apparently Fox News is looking to go in the direction of backing Ron DeSantis this time around instead of Donald Trump.
Yeah.
This is weird, because if you look at the polls right now, Ron DeSantis is continue to drop in the polls. Trump is still ahead of him, but he continues to gain leads against Ron DeSantis. It's continuing to increase.
Yeah.
Why do you think they would do that? Why would they back someone who right now, looking at the Republican primary, is not the one that voters want? Why wouldn't they back Trump again this time around?
Well, maybe the network would love to back Trump, and maybe the people there would love to back Trump, but Rupert Murdoch.
Uh-oh. Oh, no. Oh, I think they got you, Kim.
Oh, can you see me? Am I here? Are you there?
You're here now. That you froze for a second, and I was like, "Oh no, they got Kim." Go ahead.
They got me. He said, "quote unquote," that he wants to make Trump a non-person. He, has said in interviews that he wants to pivot the network away from Trump. Has said, "I know it'll be difficult given the viewership, but we're going to pivot away from him." Rupert Murdoch doesn't want anything to do with Donald Trump. And a lot of, if you remember, after 2016, a lot of the networks, blamed the networks were blamed for the rise of Donald Trump for giving him so much media coverage. And so they're really trying to make sure that doesn't happen again. And so, yeah, Rupert Murdoch, for whatever reason, is all in on Ron DeSantis. He is a mega donor to his campaign. He has given him a book deal ahead of the 2024 presidential election. He's so he's all in on Ron DeSantis, and that's the person he's going to be promoting and pushing. And what they're going to do is they're just going to continue to silence Trump, keep him, the best thing for him is he should get back on Twitter, quite frankly. He needs to get back on Twitter. I know he doesn't want to because of Truth Social. He's trying to build up Truth Social, but he's talking to, just a certain group. Most people are on Twitter. Most people aren't even on Twitter, but it's certainly more people than Truth Social. But he could be putting out his own video clips on Twitter, his own, he could be tweeting all kinds of covfefe while sitting on the toilet or whatever. I don't know. But nonetheless, but he could get a lot more press if he was on Twitter. So I
Yep.
think he needs to do that. But yeah, Fox News. And I think that's one of the reasons why they got rid of Tucker Carlson, was because he was going to be amplifying the candidates that they don't want amplified. And that would have been Donald Trump, and that would have been Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And, you know, a media personality has a lot of influence over opinion, but that's it, right? The people that have real power are the people sitting in the Oval Office. So you've got to be afraid of who the person with opinion influence can help get into the Oval Office. And Tucker could really help push forward Trump and somebody like Robert F. Kennedy Jr., because Tucker did have the largest Democratic audience than even, you know, CNN and MSNBC.
Yeah, it's true. I think a lot of people don't realize that Tucker was not just watched by conservatives. There were Democrats that watched Tucker Carlson as well. But speaking of Robert F. Kennedy Jr., you had an interview with him recently, and you asked him a question that I felt was the $1 million question. So I want to play a little bit of this clip because I felt like this was epic.
Oh, boy. In the end, and this is what happened in 2020, in the end, when they say, well, Joe Biden's the candidate and that's it, are you going to endorse him for president when you decide, if you decide you're not going to run?
I'm in it to win it. So I'm not thinking of a plan B.
Okay. My only advice is don't do that. If it comes down to that, and the Democratic Party is just saying, we're not going to put you on the ticket, and that's that, don't endorse Joe Biden, pivot, go independent. You know, but the last thing you should do is say, yeah, this is okay, fine, concede, don't do it. That's just the one thing that I would say. But I definitely.
How come you have no faith in my candidacy?
I don't have any faith in the Democratic Party. I have a lot of faith in your campaign. I have no faith at all, zero, zilch, none in the Democratic Party. I don't think that they're going to allow you to become the candidate. I think that they've already shown that. And they're going to put Joe Biden on the ticket, and none of us are going to have a choice about it. I think the only thing you could do is your campaign could continue to grow in momentum, of course, which you are. That would be challenging to the Democratic Party, but they will ensure that the establishment media suppresses that information so that they don't see that you're actually growing, because they know that that would have an avalanche effect, that when people start to see that you're actually growing in the polls and that more people are interested in your message, then others are wanting to check that out. They're going to suppress that. I just have no faith at all in them. So I think it's inevitable that Joe Biden's going to end up being the candidate, and you're going to have to pivot. And that might not be such a bad thing. I think ultimately you could win this. I don't know if on the Democratic ticket, I get it. Dennis Kucinich is the same way. He doesn't want to give up the Democratic Party, but I think the Democratic Party gave you up. And so what are you going to do? They broke up with you. You know, you at some point have to accept it. And this is one of those times, I think that, but hey, the challenge is helpful for press, I think, to continue challenging Joe Biden. I do think that helps from a media perspective, of course. They want to see, oh, this, you know, you're being censored, you're being silenced, you're not being allowed onto a debate stage with him. So I think that is actually good for your campaign for a while, but then there's going to be a period of time when it isn't. And I hope you pivot. That's what I'm hoping. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, well, I'm hoping you're not such a great soothsayer, Kim. And that
I understand. I totally get it. I get your perspective. I'm a realist. That's who I am. So, but yeah.
Look, you make a compelling argument, and I hope that the situation in our country is not as grim as you portray it, but it may be. We'll see.
Okay, so Kim,
that's painful.
When I played this clip last night, people, and I looked at the chat, and people in the chat were like, he seemed surprised. He seemed somewhat shocked to hear you say, which is true. This is exactly what the DNC is going to do. But it almost seemed like he was a little bit naive and he hadn't heard this before. Did you get that impression?
Well, in the moment, I wasn't really I actually can't see my guests right now when I'm talking, because I'm in a remote studio right now. I'm not in my normal studio. And so normally I have a screen and I can actually kind of see their faces a bit, but right now I don't have that. So I couldn't see his face. Plus that interview, it just suddenly happened. His campaign contacted me and said, can you do an interview with him like in an hour? And I just said, okay, and got myself ready and did it. But yeah, if he's surprised by that, I'm surprised he's surprised by that. I think if anybody's been paying attention outside of the mainstream establishment, then you should see and know that that is exactly what the Democratic Party is. I think maybe a big part of him doesn't want to believe it. He kind of views the Democratic Party as almost like a religion or like a family member. And it isn't. A political party, people should be willing to give up their political party. This is not your religion. This is not your family member. You can walk away from you're supposed to court parties and date parties and figure out where you belong. And that might change every few years. Yep. And he wants it to be, his whole slogan is Kennedy Democrats. And it's like, look, guy, they moved on. They're Clinton Democrats now. It's not Kennedy Democrats. It's Clinton Democrats. They broke up with the Kennedys. They broke up with them a long time ago when they put in essentially Republicans, which was Bill Clinton. I mean, he was essentially a Republican that they brought, but for Arkansas, he was a Democrat, but in Arkansas, so he's really a Republican. And he made a lot of decisions that were very Republican when you look back at his administration. And so it's a different party. But yeah, he needs to. Well, I changed my mind a little bit the more I thought about it. I do think he should run on the Democratic ticket. I think it's the only way for someone like him to gain some serious momentum and traction. The Democratic Party is not going to give him the nomination.
Nope.
But what he can do is he can threaten them. He can make them afraid. And he can say, I'm going to split I'm going to walk. You give us debates, you give us a fair election, you give me fair media coverage, all of that, or I take my people and I walk and you lose. You lose because I'm going to go independent and I'm going to have them vote for me. And you're going to lose. And that's what Bernie Sanders should have done. That's what Donald Trump will do. We could end up with 4 political parties at the end of this.
Do you think that RFK Jr. will do that? And I ask that question because a lot of people, like a lot of my viewers, they like him. They like his message. They like his platform. But when I did the poll, it's interesting because I showed your poll and then I did a poll on here. When I did the poll, most people said they would only support him if he ran as an independent, at least in the general. So it just, or not just in the general, but also like if he did like a dirty break and ran as an independent, they would support him, but they won't support him if he just goes all in as a Democrat. Do you think that he would do that he would walk away?
I don't know. He seems to love that Democrat. I mean, he seems to have like nostalgia and love for it. I'm not holding my breath that he will. I guess I don't think he will, but I would love to be surprised on that. I would love nothing more. And I'll just keep, if I get a chance to keep talking to him. I don't know if he'll talk to me again after that. Who knows? Who knows if he'll want to. I mean, he's had worse interviews for sure that pressed him on much, more intense topics, because a lot of these interviews that he's getting now with the mainstream media, they're really hostile. I think I came from, a lot of that, like ABC, they're going to press him on, well, aren't you an anti-vaxxer and your family hates you? And, we see those types of questions. But the independent voting base that we represent doing these shows, they don't care about those questions. The independent voting base is caring about the questions like, are you going to do a dirty break? Are you going to turn? Because they're going to do you dirty. So
that's right.
So you better do dirty again, back at them. Those are the types of questions we care about. Are you in the end going to endorse Joe Biden? We have learned from what we saw with the last campaign and what we've learned from, as you mentioned, the progressive squad, turning once they got in there into little establishment Care Bears. And then what we saw with Bernie Sanders. I mean, we've all been jaded. Anybody who supported Bernie Sanders, we all got jaded by that one. Burned by Bernie, big time. So we've learned, and now this big voting bloc is wanting to wanting these questions, really wanting these questions. And I think, you know, like with the Trump base, they're asking the same thing. I mean, I'm confident that they're thinking, if the Republican Party doesn't give you the nomination, if they give it to DeSantis, break away. And you know he will. Trump is going to take his voters with him. And that's the biggest playing card he has with the GOP right now. And he's using it, and he should. He's basically going to say to them, you give me the nomination or else. And the or else is, I'm going to walk. All of my supporters are going to walk with me. They're going to vote for me. They're not going to vote for Ron DeSantis, and you lose. Biden wins again. And that is what he'll do, whether Ron DeSantis is more popular than him or not. You know, if Ron DeSantis is actually more popular than Donald Trump, he'll still do that because that's the way he is, because he's fine playing dirty. He gets in the mud. And a lot of people are there, you know, they're surprised by that. They're shocked by that. That's almost one of the things I like about the guy, is like, he is willing to do them in, you know, do the dirty with them and get at them, when so many are like, no, in the end, we have to, you know, play nice. And so I would love nothing more for RFK Jr. to do the same thing on the Democratic side and split the tickets. So if both Trump and RFK Jr., who right now both represent the populist base, you've got Trump representing the populist more right, and RFK Jr., but I wouldn't even say right or left with either of them, right? But just populism, maybe a bit more left, maybe a bit more right. But they're both actually they're kind of like Bernie and Trump. They were very similar, actually, on so many of the issues. So RFK Jr. is the new Bernie in that way, and he represents that new populist base. And I would love nothing more for those two guys to just break away and leave the Republican and Democrat. You know, we might be at a historic time in history where, you know, there was a time when it was the Democratic Republican Party, and then it broke in half. And we've seen the Whigs, and we've seen the Bull Moose, and we've seen, you know, a lot of different political parties. And we might be on the precipice of a break where a new political party emerges, and it might even emerge from like Trump and RFK Jr. together. Not that they would run together, but that voting base would kind of, you know, those two would break away, and it would create this, and it wouldn't be an official political party. It would just be these, you know, two independents saying, write me in. And it would create a massive push towards a new party, a new populist party. That would be so amazing.
And I'm honestly like envisioning a new party that is anti-war. Yeah. That's like, let's get us out of these wars, free speech, a party that says, screw the censorship. We're tired of the censorship. I'm tired of seeing people be deplatformed. I'm tired of seeing people, you know, removed from Twitter, etc. I've seen people lose their entire show on YouTube. So I'm tired of the censorship. If we had a party that was like that, also he's an environmental lawyer. So he has a whole, you know, decades of experience actually fighting for environmental rights. And this is another thing I think that a lot of people, all of us that were leftists, care about, is the environment, the climate issue, that kind of take too. But if you care about the climate issue, and this is why we stress this, then you also have to care about the anti-war movement, because as long as you still have these wars, you're not actually going to fix or subdue any type of climate impact in this world. So I want people to start to make that connection, because I see a lot of people say that they care about the climate, but then they're like, yeah, let's go get them, rah, rah, USA, go to war. And I'm like, no, you have to make the connection between those two. But I think one of the biggest issues that I heard from people when I went to his announcement is that they didn't even care about the anti-jab stuff. They didn't care anything about that. All they cared about was the fact that he was anti-war. That was one of the biggest ones. They also liked the fact that he did in some way criticize the mandates. I got to be careful what I say here as well. But then also was that he's calling out these problems that actually have nothing to do with the culture war.
Right.
And I think that that's a big thing. It's like, look, guys, like I get it. I'm not saying that those issues are not important. But what I am saying is, if we have a nuclear war, we're all dead. Yeah. So none of those issues are brought to the forefront anyway. So people have to, I think, in some sense, they have to learn how to prioritize. Like right now, the United States government has been taunting, or at least I see it that way. They've been taunting China And I feel like they're trying to bring us to war with them.
Yeah.
You know, we already have the issue with Russia and Ukraine and NATO. And then I feel like you pulled people out of Afghanistan. And then now it's like you're trying to, like, purposely, it feels like, taunt China. Like you want to go to war with them.
Right.
That would be disastrous.
Yeah, I can't imagine they're actually going to do it, but you know, they surprise me all the time with how stupid they are. So, you know, maybe they are that dumb. Maybe they're that dumb. I would hope they're not, because that would be absolutely devastating to the US economy. You know, we're so reliant on China. We saw that during the pandemic, that you just shut down and suddenly we can't get toilet paper. You know, the supply chain completely unravels and people can't get what they need. And that would cause massive inflation. That would be one of the fastest ways to collapse the US economy, is to go to war with China, because the first thing China would do is shut us off. And in fact, I don't think I don't think China will need to go to war. You know, when China talks about taking Taiwan by force, I don't think it's military force. It's a blockade. I mean, they have been exercising blockades in the water. You know, when they get mad because one of the speakers visits with the Taiwanese president, they do simulated blockades. That means that they would just say to Taiwan, we're no longer giving you goods and services. Like, you're not going to get trade with us. And that would be devastating to Taiwan. They would collapse overnight. In fact, and no one in Asia would be able to help them, because guess what? Every country in Asia, their main trading partner is China. It used to be the United States, but over the last 20, 30 years, the trading party, the shift has happened, and now it's predominantly China. I think the only country where there's two countries, Japan and Philippines, I think China is, it's like 1% difference between the United States and China for those two countries. But that's it. That's like neck and neck. All the other Asian countries, South Korea, you know, everywhere in the entire region, their main trading partner by a long shot is China. And for Taiwan, by a long shot, it's China. So none of the other countries would be able to help them out. Japan even wouldn't really be able to help them out much with that, and neither would the Philippines. So, and the US wouldn't either, because guess what? You know, we get all of our goods from China. So, you know, it would put them in that would be serious enough for Taiwan to have to cave. They don't even need to invade. They keep talking about an invasion. That's not the way China would do it. But yeah, it's insane that we would even risk our economy like that we would risk any of this, you know, but then again, they're crazy. These people are nuts.
And it's interesting to me too, because when they talk about China invading Taiwan, I'm like, but guys, how can they invade a region that is a part of them? Like, Taiwan is a part of China. It's like,
yeah, and it's a very different history than Ukraine, right? When they keep trying to say, oh, it's like Ukraine, Taiwan is like Ukraine. No, it's actually not. Ukraine, at least after the dissolution of the USSR, did become its own autonomous nation. But Taiwan, that was a civil war. The leaders in that civil war ran off to the island. They hightailed it to the island along with other people who were supportive of that particular regime. They went there, and their whole purpose for going there is they were like, okay, we're going to regroup. We're going to like build back up, and then we're going to go back to the mainland. We're going to fight again, and we're going to take over. And they never conceded the loss. They asserted while they sat on that island that they were just gearing back up to go back to the mainland and win the war. And then in reality, it was like, no, you guys lost this war. You know, after a while, they realized as they sat on this island that their window of opportunity was dwindling for going back and defeating the new government, or the government that they were still at battle with them, they thought. And they saw that window shrinking. And then they finally just gave up and said, all right, well, then we'll just annex this island. And this is China. But because they call themselves China and the mainland calls themselves China, and they both say they're the legitimate government of China, that is because Taiwan, that Chinese government, won't concede a lost war. And they need to concede the lost war. And that's what mainland says. Mainland says, concede already, time to concede. And we all need to come together and be one China. But yeah, so it's a very different history. So interestingly, you know, if we're going to back Taiwan, that is almost opposite of what's going on in Russia and Ukraine. We're saying it's like it's like what Russia asserts about Crimea, and then we blame Russia and say, no, this is like what China says about Taiwan, but even more so. They have more claim to Taiwan than even Russia does over Crimea, or Russia does over Donbass or Ukraine or any of that. Taiwan has much more of a claim over Taiwan because it is China. I mean, just another government ran off. So yeah, it's like hypocritical. How would we justify that defense in that by using that historical, narrative? I mean, they just wouldn't be able to do it, not easily.
What do you think about, with all the censorship that's been going on? So you have Tucker Carlson was fired, Don Lemon was fired. I really don't know the real reason for why Don Lemon was let go, but and then you're seeing people be removed from platforms. I saw you posted on Twitter, I think it was the other day, that YouTube gave you a strike for, it seems like, an old video.
Yesterday, yeah. Yesterday, I can't upload to YouTube for a week because they removed my interview with Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the first one I did with him. So I've done 2 with him. The second one is one we just watched. The first one was pretty much about COVID and the pandemic. And that one was back in February. And they just gave me a strike yesterday and removed it from my channel for medical misinformation, is what they're calling it now. It used to be called COVID-19 misinformation, and now it's medical misinformation. So they're widening it up. And they took it down and gave me a strike. And they also did this, I think, to a few other creators. And then ABC censored Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as well. And at the end said, we had to censor him for medical misinformation. So there's a concerted effort to silence his. There's maybe a real big pharma push because, James O'Keefe got shoved out of Project Veritas right after the Pfizer stuff that he uncovered. And then Tucker Carlson does a big pharma, monologue and gets ripped off the air. And then Robert, all of our videos with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. talking about COVID or whatever gets ripped off and he gets censored by ABC. I mean, maybe I didn't think that was the reason why Tucker Carlson was taken off of Fox. But now that I think about it, now that I'm seeing what's happening, I'm like, maybe Big Pharma is just that influential.
Yeah. Because they, especially when it comes to like advertisers, although I think advertisers were pulled from his show, but they also sponsor as well. I know at one point, there was one time Jimmy Dore was actually interviewing RFK Jr. and he did part of the interview on YouTube. And then he said, okay, now we're moving over to Rumble. And I think that's when they got more into the COVID conversation over on Rumble. But thank goodness for these other platforms, because if it wasn't for platforms like Rumble or Rockfin, like, I don't know where people would have these conversations without these videos being removed. It's really ridiculous. It's like you can't even have new information or a difference of opinion. There was a gentleman in reference to difference of opinion. Thank you for mentioning this, Mr. X. What about Dr. Shiva? So if I'm not mistaken, I think is this maybe the same guy? I think he ran against Elizabeth Warren, and I think he may have ran as an independent and they would not let him debate. I'll have to look that up. But this is another individual that people keep asking me about. So what do you think about Dr. Shiva? Apparently he's running as well.
I don't know. I just don't know enough about Dr. Shiva to be able to make a comment.
Yeah, I know. I have to look him up myself, but
yeah,
that's what I'll have to,
I feel really like uneducated or uninformed right now. Like people are gonna be, how do you not know this person? I know. I can't know everything, right? We can't know. But,
oh wait, I do remember this guy. Yes, I think he is the one that ran against. I'll pull it up because I want you to see.
I think this is a woman. Is this a woman?
It's a guy. I have a picture of a guy. Yeah, apparently he had some things to say about Pfizer.
Can you show me the picture of the guy?
Yeah. Let me go to images. Yes, I have seen him. Let me go ahead and share my screen. I thought so. Because he might be another one. Does he look familiar to you?
No. Sorry.
Yeah, he did. He ran for Senate. Okay, this is the same guy. So he ran for Senate. He ran against Elizabeth Warren. And if I'm not mistaken, I think he ran as an independent. And there were protesters that showed up at the debate saying, let Shiva debate, Shiva debate. And I was like, what is happening here? So that was the second run that Elizabeth Warren had for Senate, her reelection. That's when that happened. So I'll have to look into him. Yeah. Yeah. Really
Interesting.
interesting. But I wonder, like, in reference to just the whole complete, like, the presidential election, the two-party system, in reference to all of it, do you ever think back to the two Bernie campaigns, let's say after the 2016 election? Do you ever think back and wonder what would have happened if we would have been building like a third party movement instead, and where we would be today?
Well, I do think that, I don't know if it would have worked at that point. Um, uh, I think that, because I do think you need to have both sides. You need to have people from both sides. And that has always been my, when I talked to like Nick Briahna, when he was starting the People's Party, for example, we're right at the very, very beginning. And he called me and I had a conversation with him. And I just said, you can't have another party unless you're going to bring in right and left. You're just going to have to get comfortable with it. You have to put the culture war down. There's always going to be a culture war between the right and the left, always. So everybody needs to drop it when it comes to inside of politics. Let that play out in culture. Let that be a culture war, not a political war. Leave it out. So you have to bring the two sides together. Otherwise, you end up with another rendition of the Bull Moose Party, which was Teddy Roosevelt when he ran against Taft, who he largely mentored and then helped, and then Taft ended up in the Oval Office. And then Teddy Roosevelt wasn't happy with him. He was like, oh my gosh, he went full on establishment on me and we need to be anti-corporate interests. And so Teddy broke away from the Republican Party and started the Bull Moose Party because Taft was the sitting president. And so it's a foregone conclusion that the sitting president gets the nomination. So Teddy started his own Bull Moose. Well, all that did was split the Republican vote. And we ended up with President Wilson, who was like one of the worst ever. So it's got to come from both sides. And I think with Bernie, if he would have broken away, it just would have split the Democratic base. And in hindsight, so then we would have ended up with Trump again in 2020. Now, that would have been better, of course, than where we're at right now. But there is some benefit, I suppose, to being on the brink of World War III with Joe Biden in charge. And that is that it's waking a lot of people up, right? A lot of people are like, oh, crap, this is not a good party. Like, I thought that Trump was the existential threat. And it turns out it's you guys. So I think that there's like a bit of awakening that's happening. And so now I think there is enough people like me who say, yeah, I've never voted for Trump before, but if it came down to it, I absolutely would. There's plenty of us now. And so I think now is sort of this ripe, opportune time where, because Democrats always for the longest time said to us, you must vote for us because it's an existential crisis if you don't, right? This is like the end of the world because a Nazi is going to be in charge. So you got to, and a lot of people kept doing that. They say, okay, you're right. Now's not the time. We can't have that guy. But now people are like, what? No, not falling for it again because it's World War III. We're on the brink of nuclear war. It doesn't get worse than this. So I think now is a unique opportunity with populists from both the right and the left might be able to break away because the establishment parties are going to want to be very establishment-y. And I think that there's an opportunity for right and left populists to rise up and create a party that ends up ultimately replacing one of the two parties. And my guess is it would replace the Democratic Party, would be my guess, ultimately. Because we do have a two-party system and there is no real way around that. And when a party rises up, when a third party does rise up, what it has to absorb enough people that it actually replaces one of the two. Well, maybe it would replace the Republican Party. Maybe, I don't know. But it has to go one of two ways. We can't really have a third party. It's just got to be a party big enough with new ideas that grows so big that it replaces another party. So I do think now is that unique opportunity with these really unpopular, non-establishment populist, but yet popular candidates. They're unpopular with the establishment, popular with the people, populists. And I do think we have an opportunity for a populist party that runs on those economic things that Trump ran on in 2016, not so much in 2020, that Bernie Sanders ran on 2016, not so much in 2020, that RFK Jr. is running on today. I think those ideas could make a party that unites a lot of people. And I like the way that, RFK deals with a lot of the questions about some of these other things. And he just says, hash that out on your own. Like, we just need to untangle the government from these big corporate interests. And that's what we're here to do. And then you guys, and that's what I would say as a candidate. I'd be like, culture war, it sounds like it's a culture problem. Like, go focus on that. That's not a government issue. Take that up with your media, you know, the shows you watch, the music you listen to, the movies you watch, like, take that up with them.
That's interesting. In reference to one of the issues that continues to come up is the whole anti-war issue. I'm glad that more people are becoming anti-war now. I feel like that was kind of like a moot point. If you go back to the war in Iraq, for example, remember, it was not popular at that time to speak out against that war.
Right.
So we saw like the Dixie Chicks got canceled because of that. And by the way, people, when I say they got canceled, they were really canceled. Not like not like people like unfollowed them or something on social media. Like, they were really canceled. They couldn't even book like venues during that time.
And back then it was from the right. The right had the cancel culture. And it was, if you weren't pro-war, you weren't a patriot. And that's how they treated people.
Phil Donahue lost his show because he was against that war. What do you think it's going to take to rebuild an anti-war movement in this country, similar to what we had during the Vietnam War protests?
Well, the brink of nuclear war is doing a good job of kind of bringing some people together, I think. But it needs to be, you know, they're really doing a full court press to stop it, though. They're saying, oh, no, this is just Russian disinformation. You know, these are Russian people, Russian assets, who are anti-war. You know, and I'm sure they'll say, you know, I'm sure we'll see, and that's kind of coming more from the left right now, but Democrats, I'm sure if it were China, it'll be more of the Republican side that says, oh, they're just, you know, not patriots if they don't want war with China. That comes from the right for sure. So, you know, I just think more and more people kind of waking up to, well, inflation. If we get more inflation, people will start to say, why are we focusing, even if they're pro-war, even if the people are like, yeah, okay, they won't be pro-war right then. They'll say, not now. Right now, we need to focus on our issues at home. And so we need to stop these wars for those reasons. And I think we find that in the anti-war movements, when I anyway, talk to people who all support less war, they have a different reason. I even just co-moderated the Libertarian Presidential Forum the other day with Larry Sharp. And it was interesting. Yeah, when we got into the foreign policy question, each of the four Libertarian candidates had pretty much a different reason for being against the war in Ukraine. You know, one would say, oh, yeah, we got to stop Russia, that, you know, we do, but not right now because we don't want to spend all the money on this. And then maybe another one would say, no, it's not, you know, there's more to it. The story is not exactly as it seems. It was partly NATO's fault. And then another person would say, we just need to spend money in America. We just need to focus all the dollars here. You know, they're more isolationist. It's interesting. People have a different reason. A lot of people have different reasons for being anti-war. So it's just, I guess, for a big movement to suddenly happen. Well, for one, Vietnam, it took, you know, people died. It took a loss of American lives. So hopefully it wouldn't need to take that. Hopefully we'd do, you know, a big movement before that point. But yeah, I mean, it's, I think we just got to get a bunch of people who just are against war for a bunch of different reasons together and saying, we just don't want to spend our American dollars on this.
Well said. All right, Kim, I have two more questions for you.
Sure.
Speaking of moderating, it was brought to my attention on call-in a couple nights ago. We have been summoned, I guess, so to speak, because they've already said that they're not going to let them have primary debates, right?
Yeah.
So it has been suggested that we do it, meaning like you and I. And I'm throwing this out to you. I said, well, Kim will be here Friday, so I'll mention this to her. So I'm throwing this out to you, and I think you could do it. I don't know about me. I haven't done like moderating debates, but they were saying, why not independent media have their own primary debates? Obviously, you know, Joe Biden wouldn't show up. He's not going to come on independent media. They wouldn't allow that. But Marianne and RFK Jr. probably would.
Yeah.
And so some people were saying, like, why don't you guys just do it? That way we could see something, put something out there.
Yeah.
Would you be interested in doing that?
Yeah. I mean, you know, I don't want to say no, but I don't really like, I mean, I don't like stepping that, I would love to watch it more than I would like to moderate it, to be honest with you. I would love to see it happen. I think Twitter would be a great place for that forum. I think I think Tucker maybe could come back and do something like that. And that would get a lot of press. I just think that there would be somebody better who would maybe bring a lot more eyeballs to it. Because I think people that are watching my show, they're already familiar with these candidates. And it'd be nice if there was somebody more outside of that, more mainstream, I suppose, like Tucker, who maybe would come in and say, I'm going to host a Twitter show and we're going to put these people on Twitter. And I think Elon probably, I don't know if he has any money left. I mean, I know Elon has a bunch of money, but I don't know if he spent it all on Twitter, and Twitter's like not even really profitable at this point. So I'm not sure if he could bring, Tucker to Twitter, but that would be a good place for Tucker. Probably. I mean, if Elon was smart, right? Smart. That's
maybe someone like Jim. Well, Jimmy probably wouldn't want to do it, but I was going to say maybe someone like Jimmy or someone like.
Again, I think his audience is already familiar. I just think it needs to be bigger. Somebody needs to help really propel these candidates, because, like you said, your parents didn't know. We got to get people outside of the independent media bubble, because it is a bit of a bubble. And so we need to get somebody outside of that bubble. And I welcome Tucker Carlson. I hope he joins independent media. That would be huge. If Tucker Carlson announces, I'm going independent media and I'm hosting a show now on Twitter or wherever he's hosting it, or Rumble or wherever, that would be massive for independent media creators. It would become the death of Fox News and MSNBC and CNN. Yes. They would start to die off, and more people would be coming to independent places. It would only help. So
I agree.
That's what I'm hoping for. I'm hoping he comes along, and I'm hoping maybe he'll then host debates, and maybe, he's got enough money to like build out an actual debate stage. And I don't have that kind of money. I don't have any money. So wouldn't be able to do that at all. I can do like, I could make it green, the green screen thing, and like do the virtual look. But that would be.
It's funny when people mention that, because I was thinking to myself, like, where would we put them? I have no place for. Where would they go? Like, I have no place for them to stand. Like, yeah. I'm sorry, but
right.
All right, Kim. So the final question I have for you is this. So I've been asking everyone this question that's come on that either host a show or is independent journalists. What advice would you give to someone who's considering doing what you do, becoming an independent media commentator? What advice would you give them?
Oh gosh. What advice? Well, I've had people ask me for advice in the past, and I've always just said, you have to be yourself, and you have to express your opinions, and you can't be afraid of backlash. I mean, I get backlash all the time. So you can't be afraid of backlash. You can't be afraid. And that's, when I first went into it, it was in the early 2019. And I knew I wanted to get into politics. And so I spent the year prior working for kind of political news, kind of newsletter, and kind of at websites that were just kind of startup-y. And they were Democrat, established, really liberal left Democrat. And, I was I was your casual, normal person who had a real, had a normal job, not a political job, had a regular person job. And so I could only pay enough attention to news like anybody else, mildly. I read headlines, skimmed articles here and there, but the only thing I knew was what the establishment fed me, what mainstream fed me. So I went into but I knew I wanted to do politics. So I knew, when I went into it, I thought, okay, I read some of these headlines, I kind of know what's going on. But then as I was doing the job and actually needing to research to write articles, I would start, I'd get on a story, and then I would really research, and I'd be like, oh my gosh, this is not at all what the mainstream media is saying. Like, this story is nothing like what they're claiming. And okay, so I started off super establishment-y and super mainstream media, but trying to be kind of different. And the more I got into it, I was like, oh my gosh. So when I decided to start my own show, it was because I had a falling out with the organization I was working with. They just, over the year, I had changed so much in my viewpoints. And at the end, they just thought I was right-wing because I just wasn't agreeing with the mainstream liberal viewpoints. But I knew I wasn't right wing. So I thought, okay, I'm just going to launch this YouTube channel and we're going to see. And I'm really afraid. I was afraid. I just thought, I don't think anybody shares my viewpoints. They're very different. They're not right or left. I don't know. And so I just started, and it ended up being, I was really scared. I'm not going to lie. And it ended up being wildly popular. I mean, people suddenly, my first video got like 1,000 views out of nowhere. And I was like, wow. And then the second one got like 2,000 views, and it just grew and grew and grew to where by month 2, I was getting 100,000 views on a video. And I'm like, whoa, people are gobbling this up. Like I was so scared. But I think the moral of that story is you just have to speak what you believe, what you actually think, your actual opinions. Don't try to fall in line with some narrative that you think is popular. Have guts, get out there and say what you think, say what you really truly think, and then let the audience decide. And some people, they do that. I see a lot of creators that do that, but their genuine opinion is just not that popular. That's okay. They do build a niche audience, and it works. Sometimes it turns out your actual opinion is popular, and that's kind of a luck thing, I think, more than anything. But yeah, you just have to, you can't be afraid. And, I oftentimes will actually, on Twitter, I'll say things in particular on that platform, trying to weed out certain types of audience. I know some people want to say, no, all audience is good. And that's not true. There is some toxic audience. There's some you do not want. And if you build too many of that kind, it's going to backfire. And that's the type that will cancel. Anybody that will cancel because they don't like your opinion, because they think suddenly you're not moral. That's one piece of advice too. You do not want that audience. You can build a big audience off of culture war, but then they will turn on you on a dime and you'll be done, in a minute. So I weed them out. I'll say things when I think my audience is going too far in one direction. I'll say something knowing it's just going to upset a bunch of them, and like 2,000 of them are going to leave. Usually it's like 2,000 or 3,000, and I'll just watch the number go down and be like, okay, well, now, now they're gone because they're that type. They're the culture warrior type that just doesn't want to hear it. So don't build that audience. That would be my other opinion, my piece of advice, I guess.
Awesome. Well, Kim, thank you so much. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. This was fun. I know I talk a lot, but you invited me, so it's your fault.
Alrighty. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, guys. A wealth of information there from Kim. I hope you enjoyed that interview. I have 2 news stories that I do want to cover, and we will do call in tonight. I know we didn't get a chance to do it last night, so I'll make up for that tonight. And I definitely want to hear your opinion about this. If you have not had the chance to do so, go ahead and hit that like button. That helps me with the algo, and we will go ahead and dive right in here. So I do want to go ahead and show the thumbnail so you can see the other stories that we're going to be discussing tonight as well. Skadoodle. All right, guys, tonight we are discussing, of course, Kim Iversen was just here. We're also going to discuss Briahna Joy Gray questions Marjorie Taylor Greene. I actually thought that was an interesting discussion, so we're going to talk about that. And that is actually the call-in segment tonight. Who do we build coalitions with? So we're going to talk about that. And last but not least, I'm going to discuss the Canadian remote worker strike. I don't know if you guys have heard of this story. It was actually Eric who told me about this. I was not aware this was even going on. So, I love to talk about what's happening with the workers. I think that's important. Quick shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. Thank you guys so much for your support. Really do appreciate it. If you're interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories: members, Sabbies, Sabsters, Sabinators, and of course, the ultimate. All of their names are listed here. You can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen there on the ticker. Really, really appreciate your support, guys. And I am working on trying to find a way to clean this up because I don't know. I want to make it cuter. And I shouted out all one last night. Anyway, I think it could just be more presentable. I don't know. I'm not good with like graphic stuff. I don't know. The best I can do is a thumbnail. That's it. Anywho, want to get to some of the comments and then we'll get started with our first story. Thank you for the super chat, Oz. Thank you, Kim, for asking RFK Jr. the $1 million question. Yes, I know a lot of us we were like, yay, someone asked that question. Shout out to John for becoming a Sabby member. Whoop, whoop. Mr. X, yes. What about Dr. Shiva? I told you I have to look him up a little bit more. Thank you for the super chat, Roger. Or just abolish parties. And thank you for this one as well. We don't need more parties, but abolish all parties. Thank you for the super sticker, Everton. And thank you for the super chat, Everton. If what Kim says happen and we get a third party, I completely feel Democrats and Republicans will combine, leaving the new party as the worker party. That's interesting. That could happen. Thank you for the super chat, Lawrence. Bring back the League of Women Voters to host debates. Ooh, that's a good idea too. I forgot about them. Thank you for the super chat as well, Roger. Tucker and Sabby. That would be an interesting combo, man. That would be, people would grill me for that one. I would get a lot of hate for that one. You kidding me? A lot of hate. You trying to sell me up the river, Roger? Thank you for the super chat, Mary. If PBS can do it, you guys can pull it off. Yeah, I really don't think I'm the one to do this just because I've never moderated this kind of thing before. I think it needs to be someone who has more experience and someone who's bigger so that they can reach more people. Dabby Dab, Sabby Sabs, do it like a panel with the moderator. Yeah, I don't think I'm the one for this. Douglas, here we go. Rogan for debate host. There you go. Let Joe Rogan do it. Michael, debate host. Why not Aaron Mate? That works too. Anyone but me. You guys recommend them. Tell them I said so. Thank you for the super chat, Donald. Listening to both of you due to RFK Jr. Thanks. You are welcome. Thank you for the super chat, Zach. Everyone demanding RFK Jr. run as an independent his first week should just go further into the future and demand he run as president. Okay, I get the joke there, Zach. And thank you for the super chat, John. You should be super popular, Sabby. I'm a new member. You're my first membership in a long time. Oh, thank you. That's really sweet. Thanks. I appreciate that. Okay, let's get into Canada. Yes, workers are on strike in Canada. Now, if you're not familiar, let's go back a little bit here. Remember, during the height of the pandemic, there were certain employers that sent their employees home. They said you can work remotely. Some of us were working remotely for over a year. I was one of those people here in Massachusetts. We were sent home and we didn't come back for a little bit over a year. So what happens is that people became comfortable with that type of lifestyle, right? You're working remotely. I was able to save a commute. I was able to get more things done at home. I could throw in a load of laundry while I'm about to go to a meeting, a virtual meeting. I got so much time back in my day. And this is important for people who also had long commutes, which, let's be real, some people do. Well, in Canada, apparently the workers in Canada do not want to go back to the office. And I honestly can't blame them. It says remote work clause in focus as Canada's public strike reaches day 7. So this has been going on for a week. Canada's largest federal strike in years reached its 7th day on Tuesday as public and private unions watched to see if remote working would be built into the collective bargaining agreement. So now you have the unions and they want to make it so that remote work is actually a part of their agreement going forward. I actually think that's a smart idea. For the 155,000 Public Service Alliance of Canada on strike, the main sticking point is wages. However, this is the first new contract to be negotiated since the pandemic hit, which forced millions to work remotely and has given the union an additional negotiating point. In January, the federal government mandated that workers return to the office at least 2 days a week by April 1st, upsetting many who argued that they were more efficient working from home. Remember what I told you about the push to bring people back into the office? That was so companies that are invested in commercial real estate didn't lose money. That's really what that was about. So if you have a company like BlackRock or Vanguard, and they bought up all this commercial real estate that companies like Facebook and Google set up shop in, and now you have no one coming to occupy that space, they may not be receiving a return on their investment. So that's what this is really about. Now, employers tried to tell their employees, oh, this is about community. We want everybody back in the office so that we can have community again. No, it really wasn't about that. It's about making sure the companies that own those buildings get their investment worth. That's really what that was about. That's why they wanted to push you to come back. A lot of other workers are watching to see what's going to happen because this is a fundamental issue in so many workplaces. That's coming from Catherine. She's an assistant professor in work and labor studies at York University. If they do get the remote work language in the collective agreement, then workers will be inspired to do the same. PSAC, which names remote work as its second priority after wages, said on its website that it is time to look to the future by enshrining remote work protections into collective agreements. While the union acknowledges that not every job can be done remotely, it says it wants to stick up for those that can. Now, let's think about some of the jobs that can. IT, some IT jobs, because they can remote in. They don't have to actually physically be there. They can remote into your computer and help, right? Software engineers, right? Maybe computer programmers, I don't know, data, people who are like data analysis, like people that do that type of job where all they really need is their laptop in front of them and they don't really have a customer facing position. Those people can work from home. There's really no reason to bring them into the office. People that do like some of the finance jobs, do you really need to be there in person if everything that you do is on your computer? So Michael Wernick, once Canada's top bureaucrat and now a professor at the University of Ottawa, said it is an issue for both private and public sector workers. If made a part of the new agreement, the onus would be on the manager to say no, and the employee could launch a grievance, and these issues would enter the world of labor relations. Management doesn't want to go there. On Tuesday, the Treasury Board said remote work remained a sticking point. It said in a statement to Reuters that it cannot agree enshrining remote work into collective agreements because it would restrict managers' ability to manage their own teams, undermining services and team building. No, that's not really what this means. You see, they like to use this phrase, especially HR. They like to use this phrase, managing teams, team building, and services. That's not what it's about. Management doesn't agree with it because management wants you there in the office so that they can micromanage you. That's what that's really about. Management wants you physically there in that office so that they can continue to micromanage you and they can watch you to make sure you're working because they don't trust you. The managers don't trust the workers. Sorry, but I said it. It's true. They're not going to tell you that. Your managers are not going to tell you they don't trust you, but I'm going to let you know they don't trust you. Let's go on. If it's in the collective agreement, they are forced to talk to us. It's not something they can unilaterally take away, which they can do right now. Now, that's coming from J.P. Surratt, a communications officer for the Correctional Service of Canada. Let's get to the video. I have a video clip so you can hear from some of the employees that are actually on strike. Again, this is one of the biggest strikes that they've had in Canada, and more people need to hear about this. So let's dive in.
On this Thursday night, picket lines across the country.
You don't have to be in an office to do your job well.
The demands from federal workers for more pay and more flexibility as important services remain at a standstill. The promise to plant 2 billion trees, why only a fraction are in the ground.
Oh, sorry, I forgot to skip ahead. There we go.
I believe it is time to come back.
Downtown cores has suffered for the past
2 years through COVID, and they're not back to pre-pandemic revenues.
It's a conversation happening at workplaces across the country, public and private. While many employees insist remote work saves time and money, some employers feel like they're losing out.
Certainly a lot of my clients who have expressed a desire to get everybody back in the office full time again, like the pre-pandemic days. The big reason for that being partially productivity, but also the collegiality.
Alexandra Samuel is a digital workplace expert who wrote,
That's false. Let's go back to what he said here.
Work saves time and money. Some employers feel like they're losing out.
Certainly a lot of my clients who have expressed a desire to get everybody back in the office full time again, like the pre-pandemic days. The big reason for that being partially productivity, but also the collegiality.
He said partially productivity. Guys, this is a lie they continue to tell people. You can be productive at home. When I was working remotely, I was more productive at home. You know why? I didn't have any distractions. There wasn't someone coming to knock on my door every hour and say, hey, what you doing? What are you doing? Hey, you busy? You busy? You busy? No, I never am, because you guys keep interrupting me. That was a constant thing. But when I worked at home, no one was interrupting me. Now, everyone's home situation is different. Some people may have young kids at home, right? Some people may have a spouse working at home at the same time. But for me, it was just me. I was here all by myself and no one interrupted me. And I got my work done and I got it done faster. So I was done with my work before the end of my work day. And I don't think they like that. I don't think they like that too much. Okay. I was much more productive when I was working remotely versus when I was working in the office.
Alexandra Samuel is a digital workplace expert who wrote the book on remote work.
We see in study after study that everybody who's had the opportunity to work remotely over the pandemic is pretty keen to keep that opportunity.
Samuel believes it's not unreasonable to ask workers to return to the office, but the approach can't be one size fits all.
Managers have this strong pull to bring people back to the office because that is, for the most part, how they know how to manage. But the truth is that's not everybody's strong suit. The outcome.
That's how they know how to manage, because in other words, when they're managing you, they're watching you. They don't feel like they need to, managers, sometimes they need to feel like they're in control. Not all. But some do. They need to feel like they have control over their employees. If you are not within a vicinity where they can see you, where they can come by your desk, where they can, knock on your door and see what you're up to, some of them feel like they don't have control. But what that really means is that they do not trust their team. And that is very important. You should be able to trust, especially if they've been working there for a while, you should be able to trust that if your employees were working from home during the pandemic and they were still getting their work done, you should be able to trust that they can continue to do that. That's how I feel about it.
Some of these negotiations could set the tone for similar labor disputes happening across the country about whether employees have the right to work from home. Taria Isri, Global News, Ottawa.
Police say they're investigating a major heist from Toronto's Pearson.
So that's the piece there. And then I think I skipped the first part. I did. I'm going backwards. Sorry. Welcome to Sabby Sabs.
Contract since 2021. One of the demands is a guarantee about the right to work from home. Employees have been mandated back to the office at least 2 days a week. This is an issue employers across the country are grappling with, and why so many eyes are on the outcome of this strike. Taria Isri has our top story tonight.
Federal workers are on the picket line and the front line of a deepening debate.
You don't have to be in an office to do your job well.
Negotiations between the government and the Public Service Alliance of Canada are at an impasse. Union members are fighting for more money and more flexibility, and they want remote work written right into their contracts.
So that's the piece you missed there. And I think there's one more employee that wants to speak.
We want to see language incorporated into the correct collective agreement that reflects working from home.
The Treasury Board ordered civil servants back to the office for at least 2 days a week.
I'm at my desk on my computer for a lot of the day. A lot of it's me reading through documents. So that's just not something I need to come in to do.
We are still dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic, and it can put our lives at risk to be in the office.
But the feds and
Okay, and then it gets back to that other part there. But that gentleman there who was speaking, he said he's at his desk all day working on the computer. Why does he need to be there? You know, just something to think about. I'll take that comment on Rockfin, Eric. Just a way for them to keep an eye on you guys. They're watching you. Thank you for the tip, Scott. If RFK Jr. thinks the Democratic Party is a family, then he should realize that just like his own family, they aren't supporting him. Also, Dennis Kucinich knows this from experience, and he should be telling RFK this. Those are good points, Scott. And thank you for the tip, Jim. Two foxes speaking truth. Oh, thank you, Jim. Thank you, Mr. Jim. Go to the comments over here. The Oracle says management wants you there to justify their positions. That's another good point. I need a job, so you need to be in this office. Robert says you could easily replace manager positions with chat GPT. Ooh, nothing but meetings anyway. There are a lot of meetings. Thank you for the super chat, Zach. Soon, stay home and jack in, not off, to the meta tricks. Okay. I'm glad you clarified that, Zach. I'm glad you cleared that up for me because I was going there. Okay. We're going to get to our final story. And this is actually the story we're going to discuss on Call In. We can discuss other things as well. You guys know how I do it. But if you have not seen this, Briahna Joy Gray and Robbie actually had, believe it or not, Marjorie Taylor Greene came on Rising. Like, how based is that? Like, when I first saw this, I was like, she came on Rising, you know? Not many politicians are willing to do that, just being honest, right? So Rocano go on, you know, pretty much every indie outlet. I know Rising is corporate, but even with Rising, a lot of the politicians will not come on to that show, right? So she came on to talk to Bree and to Robbie, and it really got me thinking about coalition building. Now, what I really appreciated is that the conversation here was about policy. The conversation here was not about tit for tat. The conversation here was not about personal issues. It wasn't about behavior. This was strictly, for the most part, about policy. And that's what I appreciate about the conversation. But I also noticed during this conversation, there seemed to be areas where Briahna Joy Gray and MTG actually were in agreement. And that made me think, can we build coalitions with people around certain issues? Let's dive in.
Speaker Kevin McCarthy's debt ceiling plan narrowly passed the House last night with the help of House Republicans, Georgia Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene being one of them. She joins us now to discuss. Welcome, Congresswoman.
Thanks. Hi. Thanks for having me on.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us. Why don't you take a minute to explain why you supported this deal? Do you think it goes far enough in constraining government spending, something you and other conservative members of the Republican Party in the House have articulated is an important priority?
I really appreciate that question. Actually, of course, for me, nothing goes far enough. We're a nation in over $31 trillion in debt. And to me, that doesn't have one political party on it. It has both political parties on it because it took us decades to get to this point. But it was really the most recent year's spending that has pushed us completely out of control. And none of us here ever wanted to be put in a position to raise the debt ceiling. But the reason why I was able to support this bill and excited to get behind it is because we cut $4.8 trillion in spending. And as a fiscal conservative, that's something that I can get behind. But what's more important to me is once we get this package and this deal done and completely out of the way, we can move on to the real work, which is the budget and appropriations. That's where we have the real power to actually make changes and help get spending under control for the American people.
So this piece here, she's referencing Kevin McCarthy and the debt ceiling. MMT would tell you that the debt ceiling is a myth. So the way that she's responding to this and the way that they're responding to this, you just have to keep in mind that, like, it would have been good to have somebody else on that panel that is an expert with MMT, so they could have brought that up to Marjorie Taylor Greene's response. I'm not an expert on it. I don't remember all the details, to be honest with you. But I do remember that part, that MMT would tell you that the debt ceiling is a myth. And this would have been a good way for someone to bring MMT into the discussion on a larger scale and a larger platform. And then more people would hear about it, right? So this would have been a good way to do that. But her issue here is the spending. Obviously, you guys know she has a problem with that. And I think I kind of get it, but at the same time, part of me is like, my issue that I have is when I see billions and billions of dollars going to Ukraine instead of the American people. So I think she has some criticism with that too, but she doesn't approve of the social programs. Like, I approve of the social programs. I would like to see money like that go towards like universal health care for everybody in this country. But she has an issue with the spending. I'm going to fast forward to the part where Bree talks because, okay, there we go.
Cost, despite being a significant critic of the war in Ukraine, et cetera. There's been a significant conversation right now that Tucker has left Fox News about right populism versus left populism. And the differences between them seem to be largely about a willingness to go after elites and the rich on a financial level and do things like cut taxes for the rich and curb military spending. What do you say to folks that wonder why you won't go after elites in those sorts of ways?
Well, all of these are great topics, and I really appreciate you bringing them up. Let me unpack that a little bit because that was quite a few things. Number one, I don't want to cut United States military spending. I want to stop all of the money being spent in the proxy war against Russia in Ukraine. I believe.
Okay, this piece right here, I want us to hear this again because let me go back to the beginning of Bree's question just to clear up something, because this is something that she does explain a little bit more, because I've heard other people say this too, and she corrects this here. So let's dive into this.
And you resisted pushes to, say, tax the wealthy, something that majorities of Americans support, and didn't seem to really focus on cutting the military budget as a way to bring down cost, despite being a significant critic of the war in Ukraine, et cetera. There's been a significant conversation right now that Tucker has left Fox News about right populism versus left populism. And the differences between them seem to be largely about a willingness to go after elites and the rich on a financial level and do things like cut taxes for the rich and curb military spending. What do you say to folks that wonder why you won't go after elites in those sorts of ways?
Well, all of these are great topics, and I really appreciate you bringing them up. Let me unpack that a little bit because that was quite a few things. Number one, I don't want to cut United States military spending.
Okay, hold on to that piece right there, because this is something I've heard people say about Marjorie Taylor Greene. So she said she does not want to cut the U.S. military spending. So hold on to that. This is what she does want to do.
Want to stop all of the money being spent in the proxy war against Russia in Ukraine.
So those are two different things. So we got to clear that up, guys, because I've heard people say this too. They're like, oh, yeah, she wants to cut the military budget. She wants to stop the military. No. She just corrected that there. So here's an issue where I do agree with her in reference to stopping the money being spent on the proxy war between Russia and Ukraine. I agree with her there. However, I also want the military budget to be slashed. I want that defense budget slashed. All of it. For me, it's not just about this particular war. That's where we differ. Now, as you can imagine, Briahna Joy Gray is already getting attacked for doing this interview. Granted, it's not just her. Robbie is also there as well. But there were some people on social media that really did not like the fact that she was having this conversation with someone across the political aisle. And so I'm asking you guys this question. When we talk about not staying in an echo chamber, is that limited to certain people? Does that mean that we can talk to people across the political aisle, but we will omit certain people that are on that side. And if that's the case, let me know. Because what I had difficulty understanding was, were people mad because the person was Marjorie Taylor Greene, or were people mad because the person was a Republican? So that's something to think about. Dwayne says we have to have a dialogue. So we're going to talk about this tonight on Call In. When we talk about coalition building, what does that really mean and what does that look like? Because it means different things for different people. And some people don't want to, coalesce with other people. Let's just be real. Let's go on.
I believe that's where the American people can save a lot of money. Ukraine is not a NATO member nation. This was something that President Biden acknowledged from the very beginning. And we should not be defending Ukraine's border while our border is completely out of control. So I would like to see changes there. I strongly support our military, and I want to fund the strongest military in the world, and that being our own military. But I don't want to fund a war in Ukraine against nuclear-powered Russia. Secondly,
So you heard that. She fully supports the military. She fully supports. So I just want to reiterate this again. Marjorie Taylor Greene does not want to cut the defense budget. Her particular issue is this war with Russia and Ukraine.
We have a spending problem in Washington, D.C., definitely not a revenue problem. Washington rakes in plenty of money, but the spending is out of control. And again, I blame both parties for that. The federal government is too big, it's overbloated. And as a business owner, that's what I've done most of my life. When you have too much overhead, you have to reel it back in. And that's how you get your company back under control. And we need to do that for our country. The federal government needs to be treated like a successful business, not a business that's on the verge of bankruptcy. Thirdly,
we need to go back and we need to look at this again, because I don't know if everyone noticed what she said here in reference to her comparing the government with the business. Listen to this.
I'd like to see changes there. I strongly support our military, and I want to fund the strongest military in the world, and that being our own military. But I don't want to fund a war in Ukraine against nuclear-powered Russia. Secondly, we have a spending problem in Washington, D.C., definitely not a revenue problem. Washington rakes in plenty of money.
Washington rakes in plenty of money. We have a spending problem in D.C. If Washington rakes in plenty of money, which I believe they do, what's the spending problem? Because, see, I would define the spending problem not in reference to the amount of money that is spent, but what it's spent on. And I think this is where we would differ. Like, for example, if you have a defense budget that's over $800 billion, but you get on stage during the debates and you tell the American people we can't afford to give everybody health care, that's a problem for me. That's a problem. You see what I mean? I take issue with that. So where is the money going? Aside from that military budget, which I just told you, the defense budget over $800 billion, where's all the other money going? The Pentagon can't even pass an audit. But she just let you know there's plenty of money coming into DC, but then she went on to say we have a spending problem. Let's go on. This piece here about the businesses.
But the spending is out of control. And again, I blame both parties for that. The federal government is too big, it's overbloated. And as a business owner, that's what I've done most of my life. When you have too much overhead, you have to reel it back in. And that's how you get your company back under control. And we need to do that for our country.
She is comparing the federal government to a business. You see how this works? What did I tell you? Who really makes the decisions? Is it the politicians in DC, or is the companies, the corporations, the donors that own the politicians? It's the corporations and the donors. It's Wall Street and the military industrial complex. They're really the ones that are making decisions in our government. Kim just told you. Kim was just on here. She just told you about the groups behind the politicians that are bankrolling the politicians. And typically the way it works is the politician that has the most money usually is the one that wins. Usually. But she sees it as a business. So again, this is another thing. This is letting the cat out the bag. This is actually what the government, it has become a business. That's it.
Federal government needs to be treated like a successful business, not a business that's on the verge of bankruptcy. Thirdly, for Fox News, one of the biggest media companies in our country, to fire their top guy, Tucker Carlson, I think is a very dangerous sign for America. I think it's an assault on our First Amendment, and I really value a free press. I do. This is something I talk about frequently.
So I will agree with her there. And I didn't even like Tucker Carlson, but I would agree with her about the censorship and the free press. I agree 100% with her there. So would you collaborate with someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene over an issue like censorship and free press? Hold on to that thought.
And when a media company fires their top guy, the guy that's bringing them in the most money, the most revenue, the most ad dollars, it really shows something's wrong. And what I believe happened there is Fox News caved to the woke mob, and they were being sued on multiple levels, really in political nature. And that's the way most conservative Americans see it. There has been a huge backlash against Fox News. Pretty much everyone I know has canceled their Fox News app. They've taken it off their phone. They've canceled their Fox Nation subscription, and they've said they're walking away from Fox News. And I don't blame those Americans one single bit. Tucker Carlson, on his show, Tucker Carlson Tonight, and on his show on Fox Nation, has been covering the news stories that Americans desperately want to hear, because we don't hear them largely from the left-biased mainstream media in this country. And Tucker Carlson is someone that will come back around, but Fox News needs to do the right thing and work with Tucker Carlson and not keep his mouth shut with duct tape. They need to let him go and let him out of his contract so that he can do his show and go on to bigger and better things. And we look forward to seeing him come back.
Again, excuse me. I agree with her about the censorship, because the thing is, once you censor one, then you start to censor others. Remember when they silenced Donald Trump, and then next thing you know, YouTube came for leftists, So these businesses don't care. There goes the anti-war narrative. Is Fox News still going to bring on anti-war voices? That's one thing I will say. He was willing to do that. So there you go.
It's interesting that he was virtually the only person on cable news, on any network, who was saying some of the things you just expressed, for instance, on Ukraine being a proxy war. Do you think he should run for president?
Well, I don't know. That would be up to Tucker Carlson. So I'm supporting President Trump for president in 2024. And I have no idea if Tucker would want to do something like that. I think he's more interested in going back to the career that he rightly deserves, because he worked so hard at developing it.
Speaking of Trump and the 2024 battle, many people think that DeSantis is eventually going to declare as well. A lot of conservatives, like DeSantis, want a fresh face, like what he's doing in the state of Florida, can point to his huge successes in the midterms, even versus kind of the general Republican landscape. What is your case for Trump still being the best person to lead the Republican Party in 2024, given that he did lose to President Biden last time around?
Well, I would say it's not really a lot of conservatives that want to see Ron DeSantis run for president. As I watch the polling every single day, he's down. He keeps dropping in the polls. He's down to around 20% now, nationwide polling. So that's not a very large portion of conservative Americans. President Trump is the man we want to see back in the White House. And that's because we know his record that he showed the American people for 4 years. It was a record of success for our country, energy independence for the first time in decades, We had world peace for the first time in decades. We had a strong economy.
I don't know about that. And she said we had world peace. I don't know. Okay, so Donald Trump may not have started any new wars, but that doesn't mean we had peace. There were still drone strikes that were happening. I mean, well, we don't have world peace. I would have pushed back on that. I definitely would have pushed back on that point there.
We had a strong military, and we were respected, among the world, especially from world leaders. Freedom of speech is important. Our Second Amendment is important. Our children's education is important. Our economy is important, and lowering crime is a top priority. So these are the things that we know that President Trump brought America, and we want to see all those things come back for everyone in this country.
I want to come back to something that you said before, Representative, about being a successful businesswoman and thinking that the country needs to be run as a business. I think many populists perceive that the country is too much run in that direction. 57% of Americans think that billionaires, the extremely rich, should pay more of their fair share. In the debt ceiling bill that was just passed, there were cuts to assistance for women and children's nutrition and elderly nutrition, 3 million people who have their services cut. And it does seem over and over again that there is an extreme appetite for cutting the budget in ways that disproportionately affect poor and working people, while there's absolutely no appetite for ever taxing elites whose wealth share has grown exponentially over the course of the pandemic when so many people are struggling. So what do you say to folks who say the kind of populism that is being promoted by some people on the right is really a faux populism that really isn't invested in raising the material well-being of the poorest and most working class people in this country?
So that's a good point. What about taxing, the rich more? What about taxing the elites?
I really love talking about this topic with you. Actually, it's the unholy union of a powerful federal government with big corporations that has created a lot of the problems that we have. And it's the trade deals for decades where we...
What did she just say? What did she just say? She let this slip out. Some Republicans might not be happy with her saying this. I don't know. But she let this part slip out. Listen.
So what do you say to folks who say the kind of populism that is being promoted by some people on the right is really a faux populism that really isn't invested in raising the material well-being of the poorest and most working class people in this country?
I really love talking about this topic with you. Actually, it's the unholy union of a powerful federal government with big corporations that has...
A powerful federal government with big corporations. She's not wrong there. I agree with her about that.
It's created a lot of the problems that we have. And it's the trade deals for decades where we sold out American factories and manufacturers and sent our jobs overseas and forced American companies to compete with countries like China and India, Mexico, and many others who use very cheap labor and child labor. You see, our American workers couldn't compete and our American companies couldn't compete to that. And that was the government that made that decision. They sold out American businesses. And by doing so, they sold out America's blue collar workers. What we need to do is we need to break the unholy union between the federal government and big corporations. And we need to make American companies number one in the world again. And we need to stop forcing American companies to unfairly compete with foreign countries. And let's go a bit further there.
She just told you that we need to break that connection between big corporations and the federal government. So my question then is, okay, so then are you saying that we should have publicly funded elections? Are you saying that no political candidate should be able to take corporate money? Because that's part of that break would include that. Part of it would include that. You hear this? That sounds like something Bernie Sanders would have said. Let's go on.
You see, it's the excessive out of control spending in Washington, D.C. and the oversized government that has forced inflation to become so high that's really hurting America's poor. This is something I greatly understand. This is all that my friends and family. These are the people that I know and love back home in Georgia, and many of the Americans that I talk to across the country. Americans are suffering because of the horrible decisions in Washington, D.C. And the horrible decisions in Washington, D.C. are hurting the very people that pay the taxes, that pay the light bills for here in this building I'm sitting in. And it's time to make that end.
Well, I tend to agree
but the big problem is when we have lobbyists that we see every single day coming to lawmakers like me, pushing the interest of big companies, big pharma, the military industrial complex, and et cetera. But yet we don't see any lobbyists coming here pushing the interest for the small business owner, mom and dad back home, the mom and pop grocery stores and so forth. That's everything wrong with Washington. And those are the kinds of changes that I want to make.
Yeah, I did.
Uh-oh. And this was the piece that was interesting to me too, when she brought up the lobbyist, because again, that sounds like something that Bernie Sanders would have said. That sounds like something that the squad would have talked about, 2 years ago or so, right? Based on some of the things that she said in this interview so far, she may not realize it, or maybe she does, but she agrees with some of the same things that Democratic Socialists have been saying. And if it wasn't for the political parties, there wouldn't be that divide for the most part. Now, they don't agree on everything, but if we didn't have political parties, for the most part, there wouldn't be that divide. You see the problem with the political parties? Now, here's Bree's response here.
I do agree with a lot of that, Representative, which is why there's a question about why conservatives have pushed for the relationship, the ability for people to spend exponentially, frankly, and undermine the one person, one vote principles of our democracy. So decisions like Citizens United have greatly expanded the power of corporations to influence the government. Right now, we're in the middle of a discussion about whether members of the Supreme Court have had undue influence because of informal lobbying efforts, people have argued. So would you support efforts to restrict the amount that corporations can spend in politics?
Well, I'll give you an example. I can only speak for myself. I don't take donations from lobbyists. That's something that I decided to do from the beginning. And I truly believe that each representative, all 435 of us, we really are kind of like lobbyists, or we should be, for the people and the businesses back home in our districts. So I'm very interested in looking at some sort of changes possibly that can be made for lawmakers and to reduce the influence of big corporations on legislation here in Washington, D.C., and make sure that we have the right focus on the American people. But also, I'm a business owner, so I do understand the needs of businesses and their ability to be heard in things that affect their industry here. So I actually see it both ways. But I just want to remind you, I'm not really your average conservative or average conservative Republican, because I complain a lot of times about my party just as much as I do about the Democrat Party.
That's the key part right there. She's letting you know she's not the average conservative. So that's important to mention. Someone just pointed this out in the chat. I did not notice this. Here we go. Papa, Matt Gaetz also does not take money from lobbyists. I didn't know that. See, these are things we don't know. This is what I'm saying. If we don't have these conversations, how do we know? How do we know? Because liberal media isn't going to tell you this, and vice versa. Fox News isn't going to tell you this about the other side. So the thing is, without having this conversation, how do you know? So it was interesting to me. Some people had already, smeared Bree after this interview, and it was very clear to me that they did not watch the interview. It was very clear to me they didn't even watch it. So I think it's important to have these conversations. One more piece here, and then
I appreciate that. But just on that one point, not taking money from lobbyists is one thing, not taking money from corporate interests is completely another. I might be mistaken, but very few politicians actually take that no corporate money pledge. Bernie Sanders was one of them. Despite taking that pledge, managed to out fundraise everybody else in the Democratic Party. Would you ever consider swearing off all corporate donations, speaking to, as you have done, how pernicious the influence of corporate money is in politics?
Well, I'm really excited to tell you that almost all of my donations are small dollar donors. I think my average donation, I could be off by a few dollars and change here, is somewhere around $35.
$35. So that explains why she can say whatever she wants. I didn't know that either. Do you hear this? Not all of them, but she said almost all. And that explains why she can go into Congress and raise Cain, as my grandma used to say, raise Cain. That's why. But again, had it not been for this interview, I wouldn't have known that. Now, she's not saying she does not take corporate money at all, but she's saying almost all of it is small donations.
Per person. So I'm not exactly sure what my average donor is, but I think it's around that dollar amount. But I'd have to look at what that pledge looks like, because again, what if I have one of my constituents that we have the flooring companies in Dalton. So I don't want to say I'm going to swear off donations from someone that lives right there in my district.
Before we let you go, Congresswoman, wanted to give you a chance to respond to Hunter Biden calling for a House Ethics Office investigation into you. What do you have to say about that?
I actually was pretty amused when I learned about this news. You know, it's really interesting that Hunter Biden, the son of the President of the United States, especially I went in the Treasury and read the SARS reports. I've seen what banks were saying about his financial transactions, and I've also read his bank records. And I've seen the wire transfers from China and other foreign countries directly into fake companies. These are LLCs and shell companies that don't produce a product or any kind of service. And then I saw in the bank records where Hunter Biden and many of his other family members got paid directly out of these shell companies.
Uh-oh. Ding, 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 ding. Well, well, well. This piece right here, where Hunter Biden and his company, his family members were paid.
This news, you know, it's really interesting that Hunter Biden, the son of the President of the United States, especially I went in the Treasury and read the SARS reports. I've seen what banks were saying about his financial transactions, and I've also read his bank records. And I've seen the wire transfers from China and other foreign countries directly into fake companies. These are LLCs and shell companies that don't produce a product or any kind of service. And then I saw in the bank records where Hunter Biden and many of his other family members got paid directly out of these shell companies, these LLCs. So again, I find it really amusing that Hunter Biden is so offended that I would actually talk about that fact, that he and his attorneys had to file a complaint with the House Ethics. But you know what? He's an American citizen, and that is his right to do so. I don't think it's going to have any effect, but I was happy to share his attorney's letter on my congressional Twitter account.
One last question for me, Representative. I actually agreed with you when you called to defund the FBI. The FBI has historically gone over after left-leaning groups, murdering Fred Hampton and the like, and 85% of its budget is actually focused on pursuing left activists, left-leaning individuals. Have you made any moves to actually pursue legislation that would get to the bottom of what your goals are there? Or was it, as many people argued at the time, a kind of performative call that was more linked, from your perspective, to absolving Donald Trump from the kinds of interrogations that were happening against him?
No, not performative at all. I really don't have time for anything like that. I didn't come to Washington to be a performer. I came here to make real changes for our country, and it's been a difficult change in my life to do so. But I think these changes are very important. I don't think our nation's law enforcement or Department of Justice should be used as a political weapon. That's the weaponization of government. And that's something that should terrify every single American, no matter how they vote. And again, the Republican Party has the opportunity to make changes in the budget and the appropriations bills that we pass. And that's where I think that we can make changes like that. And I'm going to work very hard in my conference using the power.
So I agree with her about defunding the FBI, those government agencies. I agree with her about that as well.
My voting card to vote for a budget or appropriation bills to be sure that we can hold the FBI accountable and the Department of Justice accountable. And I just think that's the right thing to do.
Have you considered reaching out to any left-leaning members of Congress who share some skepticism, perhaps, about the FBI, for instance, going after these members of the African Socialist People's Party, arresting a member last summer and now going after 4 of them as Russian agents?
This is a story I'm not familiar with.
That piece was interesting to me when Marjorie Taylor Greene said this is a piece that she's not familiar with. That was interesting because Tucker Carlson was, from what I saw, the only person in mainstream media that covered that story, not once, but multiple times. In fact, Glenn Greenwald came on there to talk about it as well with Tucker Carlson. So it was interesting to me that the person that has the largest show on Fox News with the most viewers, who covered that incident not once, but twice, if I remember correctly, and she's not familiar with it. I find that hard to believe. I don't even watch Fox like that. And I saw it. So I don't know about that. I don't know.
I'm familiar with stories like the FBI targeting parents that are trying to hold their school boards accountable, the FBI targeting pro-life protesters, people just praying outside of abortion clinics. I'm familiar with the FBI targeting people that walked in the Capitol. They didn't commit any violence. They didn't attack Capitol police officers. They just walked in open doors, and they're still arresting them every single day. So,
all right, that's enough of that there. Robert, can't get too close to the blacks. Damn. Yeah, she dodged that one pretty quickly. It was like, no, I don't really know about that. I just found that hard to believe. I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but that's besides the point. The point is, when is it okay to build coalitions? So again, like I said, Bree had this conversation with her. Some people didn't like the fact that she had a conversation. They didn't sign up to become business partners. They're not signing up to be roommates or anything, but people are upset because they simply had the conversation. And the question that I have is it okay to build coalition around shared interests, even though your other interests are not the same? And that's what we're going to talk about on Call-In. I'm going to take a very quick break. Eric, I think there are starred chats to read. I'll be back.
Sure. I'll check those out. All right. How's everybody doing? It's Friday. She should have done the anime Sabby Friday. But this is where we give
like button, guys.
This is where we give Sabrina a little break before we kick into Call-In. Let's see. Do I have this link set up? No. So let me put the Call-In link in the chat right now. The Call-In's going to be about MTG and this interview and coalition building and all that good stuff. There. All right. Call-In link is in the chat. We can show it here. All right. So episode 100 of Call-In. We should have had some kind of party here. And then, so anyways, this is where we give Sabby a little break, and then she'll pop back on, and then we'll jump into Call-In. You can do Call-In on your browser by hitting that link, or you can do Call-In on your cell phone. Search up Sabby Sabs, and it'll come right up. Bree and MTG coalition building. Yeah, that'll be the topic on Call-In. Let's see what we got in the super chats, or in the super chats and regular chats. All right, thanks for the super chat, Zach. Surely the myth assumes money is reinvested. I think that was into the earlier part of the show, but thanks for the super chat, Zach. Tia Wheeler. Okay, she just wants to war hawk in other places. Got it. Yeah, referring to this idea of is MTG really anti-war, or is it really just, anti-war for some wars? I mean, it kind of reminds me of the, when we had Tulsi Gabbard acting anti-war, and it's like, when she sounded anti-war when she was talking about the interventionist wars and some of the wars, but then if you heard Tulsi Gabbard talk about the drone wars, it was a little different story. She seemed okay with the drone wars. From whoever, nothing terrifies the establishment more than when people who disagree talk to one another and find areas where we do agree. Yes. And thanks for the super chat, Raven. Bree and Robbie, what adult goes by Robbie, lost all credibility with me when they supported the Times ratting out the recent leaker to the FBI. Thanks for the super chat, Raven. Lawrence Johnson put in audit. Yeah, I think when the Pentagon came up. And let me make sure I put Rogers in the queue here. Notori said, I don't like Tucker, but I did watch a show because he had different kinds of people on his show. CNN would never. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a thing. I mean, if you go down the list of who Tucker's had on, I mean, Glenn Greenwald, Jimmy Dore, and a lot of people. I can't even think of the whole list, but it's, there's all these people that should be on air, and that cable news, corporate media just won't touch. From E. Heller, Marjorie pretends that it's just the bad capitalists. Yeah, when she was talking about, she's trying to answer some of those questions. Thanks for this super chat, Kinky. Sabs, BlackRock, and big commercial real estate interests are throwing money at politicians to force workers back into their brick and mortar buildings. It's not about micromanaging. Well, I take your point, but I think it can be about both. It can be about keeping up, using their real estate and whatnot, but it can also be about micromanaging. And off the rails, Russia Gators said, LOL, to be a performer, referencing my comment earlier. Yeah, I made this comment earlier that sometimes it seems like Marjorie Taylor Greene is basically, her whole thing is like a long-term performance art installation. Like it's not real, but, and thanks for the super chat, Roger. Watching Odin and son Thor on HLM this morning. Thanks for that, Roger. Yeah, so he's referring to on Heartlands Media. We did a morning show. It was 10 a.m. Eastern time, where my man Corey and me went on there with Kit and talked about 11 demands and talked about strategy and what we do moving forward. I heard from Kit that he'll be if you didn't catch it live, he'll be posting the clip of it tomorrow morning, so you can also catch it then. If you didn't see it, if you want to see Corey in person and not just me, or Corey on camera and not just me, you can see it there. And speaking of seeing on camera, and Roger was actually on video with Sabby on Sabby Sabs RBN show a little earlier today. And they were great on there. It was Roger and Lucy, and talking about their strategies and their ideas. So you could actually see the man today. Let's see. Let me check my notes here. Oh yeah, there was someone put in the chat the idea of like replacing managers with chat GPT, and yeah, Corey and I had this funny idea, like you could just have the chat bots in meetings just talking to each other, and they could have all the meetings they want. It's just the chat bots going back and forth, and just keep scheduling the meetings. It'd be great for for the meeting schedule. One thing with MTG that I'll say is that I feel like it feels like she's almost been was coached by Steve Bannon. with Trump getting in, about a big part of what got Trump in there was that he was just saying, he didn't mean it, but he was saying all these populist ideas. And it's this Trump populist, fake populist playbook that I think people credit Steve Bannon for. And so, it makes you wonder if she's got him or the same people or what. And the last thing I'll say is if MTG wants to team up with people on the left to defund the FBI, that would be a win.
I think so too.
All right, we'll see you on the call in.
So earlier today, I just want to show this to you guys really quick because I don't want to forget. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Please go check out the stream that I did earlier today. I didn't go live my usual time on RBN today because I had guests. So that's why my time change was different for today. But please go check this out. Roger Meadows, if you want to actually see Roger Meadows' face, he was there. It's called The Bernie Sanders Movement is Dead. Go check out that stream when you get a chance to do so. Lucy and Roger were both panelists there, and they talked about their idea for a strategy moving forward, which I think it's a good idea. Like they have their own idea in reference to pulling people away from the Democratic Party. And this is something that they've already started working on. So I think, we need different things for people to do. So definitely go check that out when you get a chance, because I felt like that was a much needed discussion. And I've already gotten, I haven't gone through it yet. My email's a mess, but I've already gotten responses from people after that stream saying, this needs to be heard everywhere. Thank you guys. So shout out to Lucy and Roger. You've already received thank yous from people for doing that segment early today. So we are going over to call in. This is episode 100. I can't believe it. I can't believe it. I got a feeling. All right. Episode 100. Bree and MTG coalition building. Based on what you saw from Bree and MTG's segment on Rising, should we build coalitions with different parties around shared interest? So that's the topic for tonight, and I want to hear what you guys have to say about this. I'm really curious. But yeah, let's head on over there. And I hope you guys have a great weekend. It has been a long day today, a long day. So my call in will probably be an hour and maybe 30 minutes because I've been going since I did a show earlier on Fault Lines. Go check them out on Rumble. I was on there earlier this morning. So check that out as well. But let's go do the damn thing. Okay. All right. Oh, also, before I forget, because I forget to tell you guys this, and I should tell you this. For the newbies, okay? If you are new to my channel, it is really important that you follow me on Substack. Now, if you've been here for a while, you already know about this. But the reason being is because this is where I send all my video alerts. I've been doing this for a long time, and it works a lot better. So my live stream alerts, every time I go live, I usually send out that reminder about 15 to 20 minutes prior. So if you're signed up for my newsletter, you're going to get that email notification so you don't have to worry about relying on that notification from YouTube. That's important. I don't rely on YouTube notifications. It just is not reliable. But if you want that link for that, I can also put it here. But you sign up for my Substack, all you do is just enter your email when you sign in, and that's it. And boom, just like that, you'll get those notifications. Once I start my articles back again, those will be here as well. But that's pretty much how a lot of people find me. And from what I've heard from you guys, it seems like these notifications from Substack seem to be working out pretty well for you. So that's how I notify people. If I have a different time for a show, other than my usual time, that will also go out via Substack. I'll notify you in the morning, let you know, FYI, I'm going live at a different time tonight, that kind of thing. If for whatever reason I'm not going live on my usual nights, I'll also do that. So That's how I communicate with people. So, Kinky, how does Substack notify us that you're going live? Pop up on the desk. It sends you an email. When you sign up for Substack, you have to enter your email address, and then you'll get an email notification that says Sabby Sabs, da-da-da, so you'll know. Yeah. So that's what I rely on. But anyway, time to head on over to call-in. All right, guys, you know how we do this. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.